Welcome to Empower Half an Hour, a mental health podcast that brings firsthand interviews and testimonies to you.
Welcome to Empower Half an Hour. My name is Brandon Spatz, and I'm your host. Today we have Kate Young. Kate works as a job coach for Goodwill Easter Seals, Miami Valley. She also has been a member of the Miracle Clubhouse since 2020 and serves on their advisory board since 2021. Welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Thank you, Brandon. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Good to have you. Let's talk about some of your mental health background.
So my diagnoses include obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar 1 disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I would also say I suffer with general anxiety.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
So I would start off by saying that I grew up in a very religious upbringing, and that caused a lot of anxiety for me. I remember starting to have panic attacks at about 5 or 6 years old. And it just kind of escalated from there.
Sounds like a lot at such a young age to have a panic attack, and can be really scary as well.
Definitely. I started having a lot of fears and phobias. A lot of fear of not being perfect, of not being good enough. Fear, started having panic attacks at 8, 9 years old, and begging my parents to stay home from school. I was afraid of things like not doing my homework or forgetting to do my homework and getting in trouble. And it just was so overwhelming for me that I would just have panic attacks and beg my parents for me to stay home.
Wow. Yeah, sounds like it was a lot of pressure you were putting on yourself to, just be your best, and then kind of, maintain also with anxiety levels.
Yeah, the fears that I started having about 5 or 6 years old with the religious upbringing that I was in was not being good enough for God. Basically, if you're not perfect, if you don't follow every rule, that God's love will be withdrawn and you won't, go to heaven. And it was just so incredibly destabilizing for me as a child, and very traumatic as a child. And I remember 5, 6 years old crying on my bed, that, afraid that I wasn't going to go to heaven because I was, quote unquote bad. I was a bad girl, and God doesn't love me, and he hates me, and I'm not going to go to heaven because I wasn't, in my mind, perfect. So
sounds really intense, having those high standards, and then the fear that you won't, get to the place you want to get to one day.
Yeah, I think the fear was just the withdrawal of love at such an early age. 5 or 6, if you're not perfect, if you break a rule, the love will be withdrawn from you. And that was very scary as a child. And really, I think for anybody, but as a 5, 6 year old, that's very scary. Very traumatizing.
Absolutely. And the unconditional love that God gives, and then having, the fear that it might go away. And especially if you break a rule, because even the slightest rules, sometimes OCD can have a hold on you during that time.
Definitely. It interplayed with my mental illness, especially later on in life.
Sounds like it. Now, what is as you got older to about like 7, 8 years old? What did the progression look like from your symptoms?
I started, like I said, I started having fears, and I didn't want to go to school because I think it was that fear of love being withdrawn. I would be afraid of forgetting to do a homework assignment or not doing a homework, assignment accidentally, and my teachers hating me, and that again, that love would be withdrawn, and I would be so overcome by panic. I would just beg my parents to stay home, and I think I would stay home I did stay home quite a bit.
Did that have any impact on school life? Being gone so long, did your peers kind of notice and kind of impacted it in that way, or?
No, I don't think so. I had a hard time as a child with socialization. I think because I was so sheltered um, with my religious upbringing, and I had a hard time with socialization as a child. I was very shy, very timid.
Hard time fitting in all around then.
Oh yeah.
Now, you mentioned that in your diagnoses that you had OCD as one of them. What age was that diagnosed, and then what age before you were diagnosed was really the most like kind of intense?
14 was the first time I was diagnosed with OCD, or diagnosed with a mental illness, which was OCD. Um, yeah, just life as a teenager, as an adolescent, is scary enough, and then put all that trauma and the fears and anxiety. Um, it, yeah, it just so much trauma, and it just triggered my OCD, I guess.
So, what kind of symptoms were you having for the OCD? There's multiple subtypes. What were the most ones that were really causing a problem at the time?
Um, I think, and I probably have, different subtypes. Um, the biggest one that I had, it's called hurt OCD, and it's basically the fear of like accidentally hurting others, um, which can be very scary. And I was obsessed with washing my hands.
So a lot of harm OCD, and it sounds like some contamination too.
Yeah, so my compulsions were hand washing. My compulsions, I had a lot of internal compulsions. Um,
Walk me through your cycle in a way. So, with OCD, you have the intrusive thought and it goes to the compulsion. What does some examples look like?
so for me, I would have an intrusive thought, and it would trigger a state of anxiety, of fear. And so I would, in order for that intrusive thought, unwanted thought to go away, I would wash my hands. excessively. And it would relieve that anxiety for like 5 minutes.
What about some of the intrusive thoughts? What kind of things were popping up at the time?
Just the fears of accidentally hurting people, of a lot of the hand washing was like fear of contamination, of having some sort of, I don't know, like I was afraid of using like household appliances because they might have, toxic chemicals. And if I, had it on my hands, and I touch somebody, or they might accidentally ingest it. I mean, it's, OCD isn't rational. I mean, it's a disorder, which which is the title. I mean, it is what the title is, a disorder. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, and just the fear of that, of, they would somehow ingest it from my hands, or and get sick and die or something. I would have fears of driving down the road and without knowing, like hitting someone with my car, and they would be dead on the road and I had no idea. And I mean, I'm just laughing because it's very traumatizing and very scary. Even though it's irrational, it's but that's just the disorder. That's just the illness. And I would remember, I think I would think about, oh, should I go back? I don't think I ever went back to make sure that I didn't run over somebody. Maybe once, but I don't think so. I think it was more thoughts like, should I go back? Should I drive back to make sure? So,
So sounding like hit and run type of OCD, and uh, just the thoughts that come with that are extremely scary because you really don't know. It could be, logically it could be a pothole. That's what it's most likely is, but in the OCD mind, it's really, it takes it and it runs.
yeah, with OCD, it's like, what if? What if I accidentally hurt someone? And it's all like accidentally. It's all like, what if I accidentally run over someone? What if I accidentally, in my mind, have chemicals on my hand and shake someone's hand and they ingest it and they die? And, what if? It's always what if, what if, what if, what if. So,
That's definitely the hard part with OCD. It's really a never-ending cycle because you're even when you do a compulsion, it really doesn't stop there because your OCD will just take it and keep going because the more you do compulsions, the more it feeds the OCD, and then the more it feeds the OCD, the more time consuming and the more it takes over your life ultimately.
yeah. And this was when, I was a teenager. I was 14, I was 15, I was 16. And as a teenager, I mean, your brain isn't fully developed, so you still have, you know, uh, you still have uh, a non-developed brain, and uh, teenagers can be, irrational or fearful just in general, or they don't understand things, which is why they have parents. So to guide them. And yeah, it was just really hard. It was just very hard.
It sounds like, like you said, with the undeveloped brain, it can be really hard to manage as well because you're constantly going through those changes. And then, really, I mean, I know from other people I've talked to, being a teenager when you get diagnosed, some people think it's just not a mental illness. It's more so, you're rebelling or different things like that. So, it's everyone has their own opinion, but ultimately it comes down to what works for the patient and how they can get help rather than disputing what it actually is.
Yeah, and I started therapy. When I was 14. And even one of my treatments with my therapist was to clean his office, actually, which was hilarious. So worked out for him as well.
So I'm guessing it was exposure therapy, ERP.
Exposure therapy, because of, I spoke earlier about the household chemicals, of being afraid of household chemicals and things like that. So he would have me clean his office.
Absolutely. Exposure therapy is such a unique therapy. What people unfamiliar with exposure therapy might not understand when you mentioned your therapist having you clean his office is that there's a science behind it. Exposure therapy takes place in a controlled environment, and it often involves charting anxiety levels before, during, and after your planned exposure, with the end goal of reducing anxiety levels and to reduce the control the OCD has on the patient's life. So going into your early 20s, kind of walk me through what it looked like for you.
So I started college when I was 18, and college was the best time of my life, but it was also destabilizing. I would have a lot of episodes of my mental illness. I believe, if I think back, I had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. I didn't get diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder till I was, I think, in my 30s. So I think it was a lot of undiagnosed bipolar disorder and the stress of being in school. And so in my undergrad, I had to leave school once, and also in my graduate program, I had to leave school once. So that was hard.
You mentioned undiagnosed bipolar disorder. What were the warning signs that you were seeing, or even behaviors before you fully understood what was going on?
Just a lot of ups and downs. I didn't even think I recognized or understood that they were episodes. My major was vocal music performance. I was on a lot of shows. I was in a lot of musicals and operas, and I would have roles, and I would get really, really into them, to the point of, those 3 months that I would prep for a show, I would overwork myself and be obsessed, obsessed with it. And after the show, I would just completely have a depressive episode, and just be destabilized for weeks at a time.
So it sounds like really having what could have been either a hypomanic or a manic episode with the increased moods, and then after that show you just crashed into that low depths of the depression of bipolar disorder.
Yeah, I would definitely say that with my prep, my character prep, that I would have manic episodes, but I didn't know that's what they were. And like I said, I would get obsessed with prepping and the performance. in general, and I think it would just trigger a manic episode, and I would be so manic. I would stay up night after night after night, developing this character and being obsessed. And I didn't even know I was manic. It actually, scarily, it felt good. It felt exhilarating, in a way.
So really, what could have been the decreased sleep and all the changes in your sleep pattern could have triggered that manic episode before. Oftentimes with bipolar disorder, sleep changes is a big trigger to kind of throw you off into a high or low episode. So even having those shows could have been that trigger point, even though it was a good experience.
It could be destabilizing. Yes. I mean, just in general, I'm very conscious about my sleep patterns and my sleep schedules to this day, because it can trigger an episode.
And those episodes can be really scary too. It's with manic episodes you get the high, but in the same way they can get out of hand as well. What kind of things were you noticing when you were in the higher part of your moods?
Like the sleeplessness, just being, I'm trying to think. Very irrational thoughts, impulsiveness, it was pretty scary.
Definitely, it sounds like it. Do you think that some of your cast members in the shows kind of noticed the change, or do you think they just kind of were, not noticing it?
I think it was like, I don't know. I don't know if they did or not. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to tell for some, and then some people can really notice a change. And I guess it depends really on how well they know you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you had to stop going to college, kind of what happened next?
So I graduated with my bachelor's. It took 7.5 years because of my mental illnesses and just not, being stable mentally. So it took 7.5 years for me to get my bachelor's. And even when you're young in general, you don't. When you go to college at 18, you don't know what you want to do. I mean, some people do. I didn't. All I knew was I wanted to perform and I wanted to sing. So I did music performance, and it was the best time of my life, though. It was very rewarding. And college opened up my mind, it opened up my life, it opened up to connections with people.
So really, it sounds like a change from your early life where you were having those hard times fitting in, and then college kind of was that time for you to kind of show your new self in a way.
Yes. I feel like I blossomed in college. I became myself. I got out of, I was on my own. I moved out when I was 21. I left my religious upbringing. I left, I just became independent. And I was my own person. I was myself for the first time in my life. And college really opened my mind to having my own thoughts, having my own ideas, having a future, having a life. It was amazing. And just the best experience.
That's awesome. And really just, breaking away from, your past upbringing of, with religious wise, you were able to really recreate yourself, which is really cool. I'm really happy for you. Now, you were saying that around age about 26, 27, that you were having some more problems with your mental health. Kind of tell us a little bit about that.
So I started going to graduate school at 29. I was doing music performance again. I wanted to be an opera singer, an opera performer. And it was about a semester and a half in that I had a major breakdown. And I would consider this, I don't know if I really believe in rock bottoms because I feel like it can always, you can always have another episode, or you can always, it could be bad again or whatever. But this was definitely maybe a turning point in my life where something had to change. There had to be some sort of catalyst. There had to be some sort of change in order for me. I had to get help. I had to. And so I had to leave school, unfortunately. And I didn't go back, but that was a choice because I had a career change. So I didn't go back, but yeah, it was really hard.
Sounds like you really figured it out, though, even, that you didn't go back, you kind of adapted to what was next. So what was the moment kind of like when you finally got your diagnosis as bipolar 1, being that you struggled when you were in your early 20s, kind of figuring out what it was and why was I having these kind of things?
Yeah, it was. So at 29, when I had a major breakdown, I was in and out of the hospital. I went to an outpatient program, and that's when I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, and I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And it was very healing to be diagnosed properly with my post-traumatic stress disorder. It was life-changing to be diagnosed because I had no idea what I was struggling with. Absolutely no idea.
So the answer finally came and you were ready for it because, you had that time of trying to figure out what was wrong, and you finally got some confirmation that, this is what it is.
Yep. For the first time in my life, I said, "Oh, is that what it is? Oh, well, I can figure that out. I can do that. Like I can get treatment for that." It wasn't this internal struggle anymore. This, these debilitating thoughts of, quote unquote, what's wrong with me? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, internal, just being what was wrong with me as a person? I thought there was something wrong with me, not that I had a mental illness. oh, that's a mental illness. Oh, it's PTSD. Oh, well, I can figure that out. That's fine. You know, it wasn't this, there's something wrong with me, you know?
It makes it also much more manageable, knowing, having that diagnosis. Now, how has it really helped you going on, into your recovery, starting recovery into the recovery you're at now? Has it helped you um, more so, or do you think it's held you back? Which one kind of like, what do you think it would be?
Oh no, I have been in recovery since I would say maybe mid 2019. Like I said, the diagnosis of PTSD was just life changing for me because I had a lot of internal shame and I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand what was going on with my mind. And so I started, after I got out of my outpatient program, I started going to a counselor. That's when the healing really began. And I started going to a psychiatrist or a psych practitioner, and I was consistent with my medication, and I was properly medicated. For the first time, I was on a mood stabilizer, and I think that was very game changing for me as well. And so I was very stable for the first time in my life between the therapy, the immense emotional healing that I went through, psychological healing, and the medication, the proper medication. And yeah, and so I was going to counseling, and then my husband helped me find NAMI, which is was a National Alliance for Mental Illness. Is that correct? Um, yeah. And I would started going to a support group, which was really helpful. And I started wanting to get employment again because I hadn't had a job. I was so destabilized. I hadn't had a job for about 2.5 years. And that's very, I was always working and working and a go-getter. And so that was a huge change for me, not having employment and, because I was very ill, I wasn't stable. And so I wanted a job. I was talking about it uh, in my group, my support group, and somebody suggested Miracle Clubhouse. They said, oh, they help with employment. So I called Miracle Clubhouse and I became a member. I think it was about July 2020, and they helped me get a job. And now I am a full-time job coach with Goodwill Easter Seals.
That's amazing. It sounds like you, within the past, several years, just once you got into that recovery mode, you've just really kept on going and rebuilding life.
Yes. Yes. I am the best place I've ever been in my life, mental health wise, and truly feel like I have a life and I have a future. Because for a long time there, I felt like I didn't, or it was questionable whether in my mind whether I could or not.
That's awesome. And the thing is, like, recovery still has its ups and downs, but when you have that, clear vision of free of the disorder, at times it's just so much better because you can actually plan for a future.
Yes. And I think, the clear, what'd you say, the clear picture? Yeah, that's definitely stabilizing for me because I can separate myself, most of the time. I can separate myself from my diagnoses. I can see it as, okay, this is symptoms of my bipolar disorder. So it's not. So I can separate it from myself.
Absolutely, and knowing your triggers and knowing what really makes things better and what makes things worse. Now, do you have any future goals that you're currently going for now that you're in the recovery, kind of in the recovery mode?
Yeah, I have some life goals. I'm just always working on, my career path. Kind of considering like, what else might I want to do, to grow in my career path? Like maybe, social, do I want to go back to school? Do I want to, maybe social work? And that's really exciting for me. I feel that I've started getting a niche or getting really into the idea of social work and working with people who need help and need support. I work with people with disabilities and special needs to help them be successful in their jobs, and that's very rewarding. And I want to do more things like that, and maybe different aspects of things than just employment aspects of the work. And so that's very exciting for me.
Absolutely, and it sounds like you're doing really good work and using your own struggles in the past to really inspire and move towards helping others getting into whether recovery or in just jobs that they like, that they can have a chance in.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a passion of mine. I love that kind of work. It's very rewarding.
Definitely. I see good things coming for you in the future. I really do. Um, I'd like to thank our guest, Kate Young, for coming on the show today. And for more information on the podcast, go to Instagram and search Empower a Half an Hour. And as always, thank you and have a great day.